The reason you don't have wealth has almost nothing to do with finding the right opportunity. It has to do with 7 habits so quiet, so unsexy, so embarrassing in isolation that nobody on YouTube wants to talk about them. There's nothing to sell at the end. What I'm sharing is what I've actually done for the past 11 years. Not what I read in a book, not what I heard on a podcast. The 7 things I do every week that stack into the boring miracle of compounding. The first one, you've been told to do. You've just been doing it backwards. Literally backwards. And the 7th, I've never said this on camera before, was the habit that genuinely worried my therapist. She thought I was building a cage. She was wrong. I'll show you why. Before any of these work, one thing has to be true. Almost no one tells you this part. Wealth is not built by the people who earn the most. It's built by the people who let the smallest amount of friction sit between their decisions and their money. That's the whole game. Friction reduction. A 2023 Vanguard analysis of investor behavior found that over a 25-year period, the average mutual fund investor underperformed the funds they actually held by roughly 1.7% annually. Not because the funds were bad, because the investors couldn't stop touching them. The richest people I know aren't smarter than you. They've removed the moments where their human nature gets in the way of their finances. Their default behavior is the wealthy behavior. The first habit is the most basic version of that, and almost everyone who tries it does the opposite. Habit 1. The backwards audit. You've been told to budget. Predict what you'll spend on groceries, gas, dining, entertainment, put numbers in cells, set alerts, divide your paycheck into envelopes. I have never once made a budget that survived contact with reality. Neither have you. Don't lie. Budgeting is fortune-telling. You're being asked to predict the future actions of a person, yourself, who you don't fully understand yet. Of course, it fails. You're not bad at budgeting. The instrument is broken. What I do is the opposite. Every Sunday morning, with coffee, 20 minutes. I open my checking account and I look at the previous 7 days. Not to plan, to investigate. The move most people miss is this. I don't categorize by store. I don't care that I spent $84 at Whole Foods. That's not data. I categorize by what each transaction felt like. 5 categories. Anxiety, status, comfort, autopilot, joy. That $84 at Whole Foods, 3 trips that week. The first one was groceries, joy. The second was 7 p.m. Wednesday, frantic, anxiety. The third was Sunday afternoon, vaguely empty, comfort. The mainstream finance people don't tell you the actual leak. The leak isn't in the categories. The leak is in the emotional substitution. A 2022 paper from researchers at the University of Pennsylvania, Verify, found that on average, 70% to 80% of discretionary spending in middle-class American households fell into the same 2 or 3 emotional triggers, and those triggers were almost invisible to the spender themselves. Not because they were stupid. The financial system is engineered to make spending feel like the resolution of an emotion you can't name. When I started doing this, my biggest leak wasn't dining out. It was a category I had to invent. I called it competence theater. Every purchase I made to feel like a real adult. Better office chair, nicer pen, the right kitchen knife. That category, before I noticed it, was costing me roughly $4,300 a year. I'm not telling you to stop spending. I'm telling you that you can't budget what you can't see. Predicting future spending is fiction. Auditing past spending is nonfiction. A forensic accountant doesn't make a budget. She investigates the trail. You are an investigator now. The trail is your statement. The crime is whatever you keep buying that doesn't make you happier. There's a kind of woman, and you might be her, who has tried 5 different budgeting apps and concluded she's just bad with money. She isn't. She's been sold a fortune-telling tool and asked to use it as a microscope. Switch the direction. Look at last week, not next week. Then ask the only question that matters. What was I trying to feel? That question, asked weekly, will outperform any budget you've ever made. And it sets up the habit that changed how I see every dollar I'm about to spend. Habit 2, the mortality math. You make money to buy things. Yes, but that sentence is missing a step. You don't trade money for things. You trade time for money, and then you trade money for things. The middle step is a currency exchange. And like every exchange, the bank takes a cut. The math I run on every purchase over $100 is this. I take the price tag and divide it by my real hourly wage, not my listed salary divided by 2,080. My real hourly wage, the one that includes the commute, the hour I lost to the meeting that drained me, The morning I woke at 5:30 because the project was due. The clothes I bought to look the part. The energy I have nothing left of when I get home. Behavioral economist Vicki Robin built her entire framework around this calculation in the 1990s. Almost nobody runs it. When I do, my real hourly wage is roughly 60% of what my pay stub suggests. So a $300 dress isn't $300? It's not even 5 hours. It's 8.5 hours of my life. A full Saturday and most of Sunday morning. A friend of mine, Margot, 39, works in pharma logistics in northern New Jersey, 2 kids, started doing this last fall. She told me she stopped at the doorway of a pottery barn last September because she realized the side table she wanted was, in her real wage math, 14 hours. 2 days of her life. For a side table, then she went one layer deeper. The version I do. I don't just calculate hours of work, I calculate hours of mortality. The average American woman who reaches age 30 has roughly 51 statistical years of life remaining, according to 2023 actuarial tables from the Social Security Administration. That's about 446,000 hours. Subtract sleep, you get roughly 297,000 waking hours. Subtract work, you get under 200,000 free hours. Every dollar you spend is a fragment of those hours, not theoretically, mathematically. When you buy a $1,200 designer bag at age 35, you're not spending money. You're spending roughly 40 of your remaining waking, non-working hours, 40 hours that exist in a finite supply. You're trading them for leather. Sometimes the trade is worth it. I've made it. I'll make it again. But you cannot make the trade thoughtfully if you don't know what you're trading. This habit quietly broke my urge to buy almost everything. Not because I became frugal, because I became precise. Frugality is not a virtue. Precision is. Frugal people deny themselves and feel deprived. Precise people make conscious trades and feel free. The wealthy women I know aren't refusing themselves. They've just done a math nobody taught them. A quiet revolution happens after a few months of this. You stop wanting things you used to want. Not because you've become disciplined, because they stop looking like good deals. Which sets up habit 3. What you do with the money you didn't waste. Habit 3. Income grows. Life doesn't. In 1877, Cornelius Vanderbilt died as the richest man in the United States. His fortune was worth, in current 2026 dollars, somewhere around $230 billion. More than Bezos at his peak, more than Musk. By 1973, less than 100 years later, his great-grandchildren held a Vanderbilt family reunion. Of the 120 attending heirs, not one was a millionaire. The fortune wasn't lost in a market crash. It wasn't lost in fraud. It evaporated, slowly, into lifestyle. Houses too big to maintain. Yachts no one used. Clothes worn once. Each generation's life was slightly more expensive than its grandfather's. The math of consumption ate the math of inheritance. A century of compounding wealth was undone by a century of compounding lifestyle. This is the most expensive habit human beings have. The hedonic treadmill. Every increase in income gets absorbed by an increase in life. Better apartment, better car, better dinner, better vacation, and within roughly 6 to 18 months, the new life feels normal. The pleasure is gone. The price tag remains. Researchers at Cornell, in a 2018 study on income and lifestyle adaptation, Verify, found that the average person's reported life satisfaction at a $90,000 salary was statistically indistinguishable from the same person's reported satisfaction 2 years earlier at $58,000. Once their lifestyle had adjusted upward, they had effectively spent $32,000 additional dollars per year every year for zero gain in happiness. What I have done for 11 years is this. When my income goes up, my life does not. Not by a single recurring expense. The money goes somewhere, but never into rent, never into a car payment, never into the monthly subscriptions that quietly metastasize. I got a 28% raise 3 years ago. My grocery bill went up because food got more expensive. Otherwise, my life is identical. The entire raise, every dollar of it, funneled into investments and a separate account I'll explain in a minute. This is the unsexy part. I drive the same car I drove when I was earning half of what I earn now. I live in the same apartment I moved into 6 years ago. The neighborhood is fine. The countertops are not granite. Friends look at me sometimes like I'm performing some kind of self-denial. I'm not. I figured out that the only way to keep money is to refuse to feed it to a slightly nicer apartment every 2 years. The wealthy people I've met, actually wealthy, not influencer wealthy, almost universally live below where their income suggests they could. Thomas Stanley, the researcher behind The Millionaire Next Door, found in his decades-long surveys of American millionaires that the median millionaire household spent less on cars, watches, and home renovation than households earning a fraction of what they did. The neighbors couldn't tell who had the money. That was the point. Lifestyle anchoring is not deprivation. It's refusing to let the inflation of expectation outpace the inflation of capacity. I've never told anyone what I'm about to tell you next. This is the part of my routine I keep hidden, even from people close to me. Habit 4. Money I never see. There is a number on my pay stub. There is a different number that hits my checking account. Most people see a gap between gross and net and assume the gap is just taxes. Mine is engineered. The day before payday, an automated transfer pulls a fixed amount out of my paycheck and into a high-yield savings account at a different bank. Different login, different app, no card attached. A second transfer moves a portion of that into a brokerage account that auto-buys index funds the same week. By the time my paycheck arrives in my checking, somewhere between 28% and 35% of it has already been moved. I never see it. I never feel it. There is no moment of choice. David Bach, in research underlying the automatic millionaire, tracked savers across 2 decades and found that those who automated their savings were roughly twice as likely to reach a 7-figure net worth by retirement, compared to identical earners who saved manually with the same intent. Same intelligence, same income, half the result, because intent doesn't beat default behavior. Default behavior wins every time. There's a story I keep thinking about. An internal review at Fidelity Investments, often cited in industry circles, looked at the performance of accounts that had outperformed all others over a multi-decade window. Habit 5. Boring on purpose. Ronald Redd died in 2014 at the age of 92 in Brattleboro, Vermont. He had worked as a janitor and a gas station attendant for most of his life. When his estate was settled, his family discovered he had left behind a portfolio worth more than $8 million. He had never earned more than a working-class wage. He had no inheritance. He had no formal financial training. He bought boring blue-chip stocks. He held them for 50 years. He never sold during a recession. He didn't trade. He read the stock pages from the public library because he wouldn't pay for a subscription. The portfolio was so boring that when it was finally examined, financial journalists didn't know what to do with it. There was no story. There was no strategy. There was only time, sitting on top of mediocre choices, performing magic. This is not the version of investing finance influencers will sell you. They cannot sell you Ronald Reed. There's no premium subscription. There's no Discord server. Nothing to optimize. The data is overwhelming. The 2024 SPIVA US scorecard, which tracks active fund manager performance against passive index benchmarks, found that over a 20-year period, more than 90% of actively managed large-cap mutual funds in the US underperformed the S&P 500. Not because the managers were stupid, they were brilliant. They went to Wharton, they had Bloomberg terminals, they lost anyway on net after fees. I rebalance once a year in January on a single afternoon. Then I close the laptop and don't think about it again. A long-running Vanguard study quantified what the firm calls advisor's alpha, the value an advisor provides by stopping clients from doing stupid things during fear or greed. The estimated annual value in returns was approximately 3% per year. Not stock picking, not asset allocation. Just don't sell when scared. Don't buy when euphoric. That 3% compounded over 30 years is the difference between retiring comfortably and not retiring. Excitement is the price of underperformance. Every thrilling investment story you hear, on average, is paid for with worse returns. The boring portfolio is not a fallback. It is the strategy. Wall Street has spent 50 years trying to convince you otherwise because they cannot charge fees on a fund that requires no manager. The most rebellious thing you can do with your money is to let it grow without watching it. The hardest part of this isn't choosing the funds, it's tolerating the boredom, which leads directly into habit 6, and the practice that scared my therapist. Habit 6. Practicing poor. Hetty Green was, at the time of her death in 1916, one of the wealthiest women in the United States. She had built a fortune of around $100 million, equivalent to roughly $3 billion today. She was a financial savant. She made loans to the city of New York during financial panics. She read every financial document she could get her hands on. She also lived in unheated apartments. She wore the same black dress for years. She ate cold oatmeal because heating it cost coal. She walked everywhere to avoid streetcar fares. The newspapers called her the Witch of Wall Street. They mocked her. They could not understand why a woman of immense wealth lived as if she were destitute. I am not Hetty Green. Her practice was, by most measures, pathological, but there was a hidden mechanism in her behavior, and a sanitized version of it is one of the most powerful financial habits I've ever practiced. Once a quarter, for 1 week, I voluntarily live as if I had almost no money. I spend nothing on anything but rent, utilities, basic groceries, and existing obligations. No coffee out, no restaurants, no new purchases, no streaming editions. Nothing for 7 days. What I was doing was not punishment. It was capacity training. The single most expensive emotion in modern financial life is the unspoken belief that you cannot survive a downgrade. That belief drives almost every disastrous money decision adults make. It's why people buy houses they can't afford to maintain a status they can't afford to lose. It's why people stay in jobs that are killing them. It's why they don't negotiate. They believe, at the cellular level, that if their income drops, they will not be okay. A 2021 working paper connected to research circles around the National Bureau of Economic Research, Verify, found that adults who had lived through periods of significant voluntary frugality were dramatically more likely to take career risks, leave bad jobs, and start businesses. Not because they were braver, because they had data on themselves. Habit 7. A tax on every yes. Most adults treat saying yes as free. It costs nothing in the moment. It feels generous, ambitious, optimistic. The bill comes later, in time, in money, in attention, in the slow erosion of the life you actually wanted. I treat every yes as if it carries a tax, not as a metaphor, in actual practice. When someone offers me an opportunity, she framed it as armor, as scarcity, as fear of letting people in. I let her sit with that framing for months before I push back. The truth is the opposite. Saying no to almost everything by default is what makes the yeses real. When I say yes, I mean it. When I commit, I'm there. When I invest, I've examined it. The friends I have time for. The commitments I keep, I chose. The money I spend, I wanted to spend. Most people drift through their financial lives saying yes to 1,000 small things and find at 50 that they cannot afford the few large things they actually wanted. The pause before yes is the wealthiest second you will ever have. This habit, more than any other, has built every other one I've described. Without it, none of the others survive. Look at what just happened in the last 20 minutes. You came here for a list of habits. What you got was a quiet dismantling of the assumption that wealth is built by exciting decisions. It's built by quiet ones, repeated, defended, protected from your own restlessness. The next obstacle is not learning these habits. It's the 4 to 6 weeks where the new behaviors feel pointless because nothing visible is happening. That's where most people quit. The compounding hasn't started yet. Don't quit there. You came here expecting tips. You're leaving with something heavier, a reframe of who actually builds money in this country and the embarrassing, almost invisible nature of how they do it. The thought I'll leave you with is this. The wealthy woman you're trying to become already exists, somewhere ahead of you in time. She is not waiting for a windfall. She is waiting for you to start the boring habit you'll thank her for in 20 years. If you want the architecture beneath the habits, the deeper mechanics of how quiet money actually compounds, subscribe quietly, the way real wealth gets built.